Salutations, Scribblers. Thank you so much for joining me for another writing video. This is going to be the first video in a series that's going to explore genre conventions and expectations. These conventions are important to crafting your story because you're working within a familiar framework for the reader. Most readers will only read within a few specific genres with occasional forays into something new, so it's really important that you know what those expectations are and how to meet them. Readers tend to find what they enjoy and then they stay there. So as authors, it's really vital that we understand those reader expectations so that we can deliver. And this isn't to say that expectations and conventions can't be subverted or reinvented, but in order to push those boundaries, you need to first understand what the conventions are and why. So today, we're starting with the conventions of young adult literature. And this is more of an age range than a genre, because within young adult, you can have all sorts of genres. Westerns, thrillers, literary, sci-fi, romance, all of those different things, etc., etc. But in order to qualify as young adult, your manuscript has to fit an additional set of criteria. So first and foremost among that is the age of the book's protagonist. So most YA protagonists are somewhere between 13 and 18, although the majority tend to be 17 or 18. In recent years, there's been a big industry push to age up young adult protagonists, especially in the sci-fi and fantasy spaces. So if you're writing that 13 to 16-year-old protagonist, it is still YA, but it might be a harder sell. One reason that publishing does this is because they call it the crossover appeal, meaning that this book will appeal to more than one major demographic, and young adult in particular is also very popular with adults. Not so much because adults want to read about children, but I think because of several of the other main qualities of young adult, which we're going to get into here. One of those reasons may be that the fast-paced narrative. So young adult books are generally between 65,000 words and 100,000 words in length. That's 285 to like 400 pages, give or take. For teens, the target demographic, this is intended to not make the book seem as daunting and takes into account the shorter attention spans. And yes, I was one of those kids that lost myself in a book for hours, as I'm sure a lot of you were as well. But there's also a whole bunch of kids out there that have difficulty focusing for just 5 minutes of reading time. So the industry solution is to make books that are plotted tightly and that move fast. So that lower word count and the fast, streamlined pacing are hallmarks of a young adult novel. This is definitely something that appeals to adult readers as well, because they want stories that move along, because let's face it, you tend to have even less time to read as an adult. Two more characteristics of young adult are high stakes with urgent plots and high emotions. When you combine all of that fast pacing and that word count expectation with those high stakes, the urgent plots, and that high emotion, you end up with a highly engaging story that's hard to put down. So the high stakes and the high emotions are crucial to young adult because this is generally how teens move through the world. The emotional regulation in their brains hasn't fully developed, and so what seems to adults to be something insignificant is absolutely life-changing to a teen. Most haven't yet developed even like a global perspective of the world, and so when that happens, there are oftentimes not well planned out schemes collapse, and then the fallout is characterized by big emotions because they just don't have that like bigger worldly knowledge that adults tend to have. Those characters, again, in the young adult space, are lacking fully developed frontal cortexes, and that's like our emotional regulation. And they don't have the experiences in history to draw on to make really good decisions. So they make horrible decisions that, like, as an adult reading them, sometimes I'm like, oh gosh, why? Why did they do that? But when you, again, look at the genre conventions, it makes sense. Those characters are going to be reckless and selfish. And if you've ever, this is like one of my pet peeves, is that when I read a book review for a YA novel, and there's a book review that says something like, I really like the story, but I couldn't stand the continued string of bad decisions the character kept making. I'm like, this is clearly somebody who does not understand the genre conventions. They have forgotten what is a hallmark of this category. And that is like big emotional decisions with very little logic behind them. Another almost mandatory convention for a young adult book is the absence of parental oversight, right? Like parents just disappear in young adult novels. Maybe their parents travel a lot for work, or like they just trust them to stay home. Maybe that parent has been incarcerated, or they have a chronic illness. Whatever that reason, it impedes the adult figure in their life from being there to help them through whatever life-altering crisis they are dealing with. It's made that character independent to a degree and often contributes to the emotional part of their character arc in the story. So you have these independent teens that are existing with very little parental oversight, right? Or maybe you have a parent who's trying to be really involved, but for some reason there's a disconnect. So whatever that is, you can't have parents in YA. Like, it just doesn't work. You have to find a reason to have that block somehow. They're not getting that feedback and that adult supervision that they really need, and that to help them figure things out and work through problems. All right, one more structural convention, and then we're going to talk a bit about themes and subjects. So most young adult books are written in either first person or close third. And this is done to really dive into that emotional aspect of the characters and engage the reader. Depending on the genre, you might be more likely to find one or the other. Many times, like romances or contemporaries are in first person, while things like fantasy and sci-fi are often in close third. But either way, it's getting that close look at their emotions so that you as the reader can really experience those moments with the characters. All right, themes. So remember how I mentioned adults are part of the YA market? Another big reason for that, I think, is the ending of young adult books. A young adult book has to end with hope. And this is something that adult books don't have to do. So a young adult book may deal with some really gritty topics. There might be some really dark moments in there, but there's always hope at the end. And as an adult reader myself, this is one of the main reasons that I read young adult, right? I will confess, I love a tragic ending. I love tragedies. I think that they are just like spectacular. And part of that is knowing, like, I go into a tragedy knowing everyone's going to make horrible decisions and they're all going to like somehow like be dead by the end. Hamlet is my absolute favorite. Romeo and Juliet, all those things. I love it, right? But sometimes I do also want some hope. And I need that hope. I want to think that there's going to be a better world and people can grow from their mistakes. And, it's not life ending as tragedies usually are. And so that's something that is really important in young adult. It is non-negotiable. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a full out, like, happy ever ending type of an ending, but it does have to end with the implication of emotional growth, that it has started and that it's going to continue. The reader has to see that even after all the bad things, there's still something good worth fighting for, worth living for, worth loving for. So that's a really, really important thing. And I do feel that that's something that draws in a lot of adult readers, because as you get to be more of an adult, you are surrounded by more of the realities of the world. And so we need that to help keep ourselves on the right path and to keep us grounded and to remember, like, yeah, there's good things and there's things that are worth fighting for, right? All right, so let's talk bigger themes that you're likely to see in young adult. So again, go back to like who it's targeted for, right? The age range of that 12 to 18-year-old is really where a lot of teens experience firsts, their first love, their first breakup, a first job, etc. And the exploration of those firsts and the emotional response that they invoke is incredibly common in YA. So you're going to see a lot of firsts happening, and then again, that emotional response to it. That character is making that transition from being a child to being an adult, and that involves a lot of changes as they start to figure out their place in the world or find their voice and their identity. So they're often moving beyond that smaller family circle that they knew, like as a middle schooler, and they're expanding their friend groups, right? You get into a high school type setting, and all of a sudden now there's like different clubs and different teams, and you start meeting more people, and then all of a sudden you're 16 and now you have a car and now you can go places and you get that first job, and that's a whole new set of people that are going to start influencing you and helping you figure out who you are. And that journey of figuring out who they are and what they want to stand out for is a really cool one. They're learning where they have their power and how to assert it for good or for bad. And teens are, of course, known for being rebellious. So there's a lot of plot lines that revolve around young adult protagonists where they challenge the authority, whether it's a student standing up to a professor or a teen hero who's determined to depose a king. Either one, you're standing up. And they're finding their voice, and they're being rebellious. And this is one of the reasons why dystopian books are such a staple of the young adult genre, right? The world is dark and dreary, and here you have this young kid coming in who's like, I'm going to change it. I'm going to make the world better. And that is something that is just, there's something really beautiful about, right? It's that hope that, yes, things can get better even when they're really bleak. So, to recap, books in the young adult category need to have a protagonist between the ages of 12 and 18. They tend to be tightly plotted and paced and incorporate intense emotions throughout. Their parents are suspiciously absent, and the story itself needs to end with hope. Tell me about your favorite YA book down below. Tell me in the comments. I'd love some more book recommendations. And be sure to check out the courses and writing retreats we offer through the Scribblers Den. Our website is linked in the description. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and we will see you next week. Happy writing, Scribblers.